All right, moving on to our next speaker. So, George Firican is passionate about putting the lights on data, being ranked among top 5 global thought leaders and influencers on big data, digital disruption, and 2024 LinkedIn Top Voice through award winning programs in data governance, data quality, and business intelligence. George's innovative strategies have garnered international acclaim. As the founder of Lights on Data and the voice behind its YouTube channel and podcast, George continues to inspire and educate a global audience, all while keeping the lights on data. So, welcome, George, all the way from Canada. Welcome, George.
Thank you so much, Jackie, for the lovely introduction, and thank you to you and Nigel and the entire strategic architecture team for having me on this event. Really appreciate it.
Of
And
course.
thanks
Thank you for
to
being here.
it's my pleasure, it's my honor, and thanks to everyone for giving your time to learn, to share, to network. I love the event so far, and thanks so much, Nigel, for sharing all those tidbits. I took a lot of notes, so but I'm also happy to hear that we're gonna have a copy of this. So really appreciate it overall. All right, let me share my screen as well, as that will be easier to see some visuals as I'm talking. All right, enough about me. I'll just mention this though, in case you don't know it already, but I do love to create content. So I do love to also share what I've learned from my interactions with clients, from my work experience, from that of others. I do like to put a lot of content out there. So feel free to check out my YouTube channel, follow me on LinkedIn, get in touch with me. I love to meet new people in person or virtually online. Check out my podcast. There's lots out there, lots to choose from for sure. So I thought we can start with a really quick overview of some really key terms as part of digital transformation. So let's start with the digitization and digitalization and make sure that we are on the same page here when we're talking about these terms. So digitization really is that basic process of converting information from analog to digital formats. Let me give you a quick example. Let's say you went to buy something and then you have one of those receipts, right? The paper receipts that you're getting in store. And what you can do is put it through a scanner or you take a photograph of it and then you turn it into a digital asset. It becomes a JPEG, a photo, or a PDF. So this is digitization. Digitalization, on the other hand, is the use of digital technologies to improve or to automate existing business processes. So again, let's take the receipt example again. So we bought something and now we want to be reimbursed by our company. And a lot of us kind of still do this. And a lot of us still do it, let's say in the old school way, right? We have that receipt, that physical receipt. And then what we do is we take a form, we fill it out by hand, and then we kind of drop it into the inbox of the finance team for them to pick it up physically and do the rest so that you can get reimbursed. Well, again, digitalization really improves this business process with the use of digital technologies. So what we do instead, we take advantage of that digitization piece. So we now have that JPEG, that PDF, that photograph, and we attach it to maybe an online form that we also fill out, which kickstarts another process in a more automated way. Maybe it sends an email off to the finance team or puts it in their queue and maybe does some triage and other fun stuff like that. And that's what digitalization is. What about digital transformation? Well, digital transformation can really be thought of as the strategic outcome of digitalization. It's the impact, it's the strategic shift that's caused by digitalization. It really involves a fundamental change in how an organization operates, delivers value, and meets evolving customer needs. It's really at that point where adopting digital technologies and processes fundamentally changes the organization's culture, structure, and value delivery in many, many ways. Now, digital transformation, it's often seen as adopting new technologies, but the real transformation, in my opinion, from my point of view, it really happens when data becomes accessible, data becomes trusted and actionable. To unlock true digital transformation, I think we need to have a clear understanding of our data and our metadata. which is not always easy and straightforward. And we kind of tend to ignore this part oftentimes. And when we end up making a lot of assumptions about our data and our metadata. I want to give you this example to try and get the point across. Now, I do have an accent. It's not a Canadian accent. I'm originally from Romania, from Eastern Europe. And I came to Canada when I was a teenager with my parents. I was about 15 or so at the time. My English was good, but it wasn't perfect. There were certain intricacies of the English language that I would not get right away. So it took me a little bit of time to learn that. But I remember that first year, I went to my friend's Justin house, and we were sitting on the couch in his living room, and we were playing this video game. I think it was like Mario Kart or something like that on a Nintendo. And we were having a great time. And all of a sudden, from the garage just next to his house there, we hear these very loud noises, these clacking, banging, clashing. It was so loud that we could barely hear ourselves in the video game that we were playing. So I'm asking Justin, "Hey, Justin, what's happening? What's going on?" And he goes, "Oh, it's just my dad. He's making a racket." And I thought to myself, oh, wow, Justin's dad is building rackets, like tennis rackets, badminton rackets. That's what I thought. That was my assumption. Obviously, that's not what he meant. Making a racket, it's another way of saying causing a loud noise, making a ruckus, things like that. So why mentioning this story? Because I feel that we have similar misunderstandings in our current workplace, and not necessarily because some of us are not native speakers of the language that we're working in, but really because of the intricacies and the context of our business. And that can really create problems, such as different units referring to the same business term but meaning different things, right? You're asking two different people to define a customer within your organization, and you might get three different answers. Or if a report or some data is being pulled by two different people, they might get two different answers, even though the request is exactly the same. We have problems when we're feeding our AI algorithms these misunderstandings too. We have problems of stakeholders losing confidence in data, or even worse, making decisions based on incorrect information because of a lack of a common understanding, because they have their own assumptions and maybe IT has different assumptions about what they're talking about. We even have problems because people spend hours chasing information that they cannot find, or if they find it, might find it in multiple areas, and sometimes it could be conflicting. And again, these problems can be compounded with AI, right? So yeah, these are problems, but luckily all problems are opportunities in disguise, right? And again, I think the business glossary, the data dictionary, data catalog, machine learning metadata store can provide us with these opportunities. So we're going to find out a bit more about these. Because again, to unlock true digital transformation, we need to have that clear understanding of our data and our metadata. Okay, let's get into it. And to do that, I'm going to talk about the sandwich. Yes, you heard me right, the sandwich. I think it can be delicious. You can have it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Maybe you're having it right now, or you're going to have it shortly. And I think we all know what a sandwich is, right? Hands up, or put in the comments there if you think you know what a sandwich is. I think we can all identify a sandwich, though, when we see one. That's kind of pretty obvious. But here begs the question, which one of these would you say is not a sandwich? If you only had to pick one, which one would it be? The hot dog, the grilled cheese sandwich? I mean, that kind of should be a sandwich, right? It's in the name. So unless I'm trying to trick you, or the burrito. I'm curious what you think, but I'll revise. I'll come back to this at the end of the presentation, and I'll give you a fun anecdote about it. What do you think if we're asking AI about us? What do you think it would say? Well, let me give you this example. A few years ago, there's this company called Foodvisor, and they raised about $4.5 million. I think it was 2019, I believe. And they created this AI-driven app that kind of helps you track what you eat. It's pretty cool because you're basically taking a photograph of your plate, and it gives you all these interesting things. I mean, what it is, yeah, you should probably know what it contains if you prepared it yourself, but it also gives you all these nutritional values and um, food facts about what you're eating. It's pretty cool. Unless what you're doing with their app is you're taking a photograph of a chihuahua and it thinks that it's a muffin, or you're photographing a parrot and you think it's guacamole, or you're photographing your labradoodle and you think it's fried chicken. It's because of the context. It's really because of what's being trained on. It's the metadata, and it's trying to do the best possible. It thinks that you're photographing food. That's what its context is. So, okay, let's say that you are, any data professional or a business professional, or even from the point of view of an AI algorithm, and you're working on a project that involves data on sandwiches. Maybe, let's say your company wants to start selling a new sandwich on the market and wants to see if it should. Or you want to develop a new marketing campaign that targets sandwich foodies. Or again, you're, let's say, an AI algorithm and you're trying to predict what sandwiches will sell most. Actually, this is what this company called Ryanair did a few years ago. So Ryanair is this low cost airline that's mostly operating in Europe. I think it only operates in Europe, actually. And what few Ryanair passengers realize as they bite into their sandwiches is that the trolleys that are rolling down the aisle are really serving more than snacks. These trolleys are a vital source of information about what's being requested, what's being sold, and all of this data and much more metadata is really fed into this machine learning tool, which internally they nicknamed the Panini Predictor. And it's really helping the airline forecast precisely what types of sandwiches to put on which plane. And you think, well, why is that? Why would that be a hard thing? Why would we need an AI algorithm to help us with this? Well, it's not easy. It's actually a mightier challenge than it first appears. Mostly because, let me zoom in here, the company has more than 500 aircrafts. It runs about 2,900 flights every single day, and one plane is traversing multiple routes across multiple countries. And obviously, each plane has limited space, about 5 trolleys worth of space, and it can only be stocked once every 24 hours. So it's really crucial, whatever they're packing there, they're taking all of these things under considerations, because in the end, you want to have improved customer satisfaction. You don't want to get to the 20th row and they'll say, oh, yeah, I'll have the panini as well. And you'll be like, no, sorry, we only have, I don't know, the chicken sandwich or something like that. So you want to improve that customer satisfaction. You also want to cut waste in half. If nobody wants paninis and that's all you have, you're going to throw it out after 24 hours. That's a waste on multiple reasons. And of course, you want to also boost the sales. You want to sell as much as you have packed in there. And that's what they did. But regardless if you're Ryanair or you're working on your own sandwich project, the question that you should always ask in the beginning is, what data do you include to make sure that whatever analysis and whatever decisions you're going to make on it, it's going to be good and reliable and accurate. Are you going to include data on hot dogs, burritos, club sandwich, grilled cheese sandwich, all these other types of sandwiches? Maybe. And that's why I think we should put our assumptions away and first understand the definition. So when we're talking about sandwiches, what do we mean when we are talking about sandwich? So here's one definition that comes from the United States Department of Agriculture, which says that a sandwich is a meat or poultry filling between two slices of bread, a bun, or a biscuit. Here's why this is important, because based on this definition, technically, the grilled cheese sandwich, even though it's delicious and it has sandwich in the name, it's not considered a sandwich.
Sounds
And
like
that's,
agriculture that it come from the agriculture. Yeah, you
yeah.
expect that.
And funny enough, it's really because the USDA kind of covers the labeling of meat, poultry, and egg products. And there's this other administrating organization called the Food Drug Administration that kind of does everything else, including the dairy piece. So if you actually work for the USDA and you included data on, let's say, grilled cheese sandwiches, you would end up with invalid results from their point of view. Even though, well, yeah, we all know what a sandwich is. Well, not in this context. And we often, make assumptions like that, right? And again, maybe, the sandwich is not the best example there. Maybe we would all be on the same level with that. But there are really plenty of business terms out there that seem obvious as to what their meaning is, only to find out that's not the case. So for example, customer, I think that's the a great example, because again, you ask two different people in your company how they define the customer, and you probably get three different answers. These are actually answers that I got from when I ran this workshop a few years ago with a company, and it took us actually a few days to come up with that final definition, everybody to agree on how customers should be defined within the organization, because different departments or different people, even within the same department, had different ideas of what it should be. So really making assumptions on meanings of business terms such as customer, but other ones like cell conversion rate, credit, GPA, you name it, is really what creates challenges in the workplace. And of course, it creates even more challenges for AI, as you can imagine. So to avoid these challenges, we kind of need to have this trusted place where business metadata is being recorded in our organization that we can refer to, such as the definition of a sandwich. Because we know it's information that's been approved, it's curated, it's maintained. So yeah, we don't have these misunderstandings. But of course, we also need more business metadata than just the definition. And this is just a sample, like synonyms and who's the data steward that we should reach out to, who's the business owner, what's the definition source, its usage, classification, policies tied to it, has it been approved to be used organization-wide, and so much more. And the cool thing is that we can actually find all this information in a business glossary, which is a collection of business terms with their unique definitions and other useful related information, like the metadata or attributes that you saw there. Actually, there's organizations that have anywhere between 20 to 50 to even 100 of these attributes recorded for a single term, but that's a presentation on its own. So that's the business metadata. We record that in the business glossary. What about the other side? What about the technical metadata? So let's say we now know what a sandwich is, and based on that, we know what data sets we should include in our project. Here, we're looking at a data set that's actually a sample from a data set collected from a quick serve sandwich chain, trying to keep it on theme. But really, especially if you're on the data side, IT side, technical side, it would be great for you to understand where you're looking at here. What do all these different columns represent and mean? What type of data do they contain? Are there any specifications, default values, type of keys, and so on? All this information is very useful if you need to do any ETLs, ELTs, reverse ETLs, but it's also good to gauge if the way the data were recorded fits the requirements of your project or not. It's really a good way to understand if you need to do any data wrangling, data munging, before that data is available for your machine learning AI projects. So all of this technical metadata we can find in a data dictionary. And a data dictionary gives you the specifications about a field or about a column, if you will, in a database, as well as the tables and other fun stuff. Quick recap here. We have the business metadata and the technical metadata. The business metadata is recorded in a business glossary, and we find the technical metadata and the data dictionary, which again gives you the specifications about fields in a database. The business glossary is business owned because it holds that business verbiage. It's this curated place where we can find definitions such as, what a sandwich is from our organization's point of view. We usually have one business glossary for the entire organization. The data dictionary, on the other hand, it provides a very application or technology-centric view of the data. It provides the description of a data element and its metadata. You can actually have many data dictionaries, usually one for each application or database, or let's say an instance of the data dictionary. You don't actually need to have multiple software or tools for it. Yeah, so that being said, though, the business glossary and the data dictionary, they can be connected and they can reference each other. So if you have, what is a customer, you can connect that to different columns such as customer name, customer ID, customer address, the customer table. So you can see that relationship between these two. The data catalog. I think the best way to understand what the data catalog is and does is to first take a look at Amazon as an example. Amazon carries millions of different products, and yet as consumers, at least this is my experience, I find that we can find almost anything fairly quickly. And in this case, I was looking for a cookbook on grilled cheese sandwich. I typed that in. I had a handful of options there, and I easily found one that I thought it would fit my needs, which I clicked on, and it's what you're seeing here. So, besides Amazon's really good search capabilities, and I would say also find capabilities, right? There's that distinction. You can search well, but you can also find things well. I find that they also give you detailed information on each product, such as the description. You have a list of related products. You have the seller information, shipping times, and because it's a book, we actually have metadata that's tied to the fact that it's a book. So things that it's hardcover or soft cover, how many pages it has, how much it's weighing, its dimensions, um, so forth and so on. And of course, we also have customer reviews, and I think this is very important because it often informing our decision to go for that product or not. Okay, so hold that thought there. Data catalogs work in a similar way, but for your databases. I mean, really any data stores, really. The purpose of the data catalog is to organize the, hundreds, thousands of an organization's data sets to help users search for and find specific data and understand its metadata. And then download it or request access to download it, depending on how you have that set up there for your data catalog. Let me give you an example. And because I'm being vendor agnostic here, I was only looking at free stuff. So this is an example from data.gov. This is a data catalog for open data from the US government that everybody has access to. And I was actually looking for data sets on sandwiches, as you can imagine. And this is actually a data set on dietary intakes from a national survey. And yes, contains data on sandwich consumptions as well. Now, similar to Amazon, we have the description, which is that huge paragraph there at the top of what the data set would contain. We also have like a privacy policy, and we can just click on it and request access to download it. Actually, in this case, you don't need to be given to be approved. You can just download it right away, use it for whatever you want. The cool thing is that that's not all. It has a bunch of other metadata as part of it. So it have things like the publisher, that's basically the owner. That's their way of saying that's the business owner. You have maintainer, that's the data steward. That's again their naming conventions there. You have a link to the data dictionary as well. And in some cases, for some of these data sets, you can actually even have reviews from other people that have used this data set. And this is a pretty cool concept with certain data catalogs, because in a way you're really crowdsourcing this information, and you can just provide feedback and say, you know what, I found that this was really good for that, or watch out for the data accuracy on these columns. I find there's all these empty values, but here's the context why that should be, and how maybe you would want to augment those columns for your own needs. And so forth and so on. I think it's a pretty cool concept that some data catalogs as solutions have implemented, and again, the organizations that are using them have the option to kind of implement this as well for them. But the idea with the data catalog is that it's this single point directory that offers the user the ability to locate information, data sets, and it also further provides the mapping between the business glossary and the data dictionary, as we saw in this example. In this case, it links to the data dictionary. So the machine learning metadata store. Just a quick reminder with machine learning, very high level, we're not going to go into a lot of detail with this, but you tend to start with the hypothesis about which input data might produce desired results. You then train the models, you tune in those hyperparameters until you build the model which produces the results that you need. So this is kind of what this diagram here, the recursive diagram, is showing, courtesy of Jeremy Jordan. And because you need to keep on trying things, there's a lot of trial and error that you have to do with machine learning, with AI. And obviously, storing some of this metadata about whatever you're doing will help with comparability to make sure that your next iteration, is it better? Is it worse? Am I going to right direction or not? What do I need to adjust there? And also reproducibility, because you might run it 10 times with 10 different versions there, and you might find out, you know what, it was the second one that worked the best, gave me the most accurate and true results. I want to go back to it. So I want to be able to reproduce what I've done before. And it's not easy to do this with a pen and paper or just an Excel file. You need some sort of a machine learning metadata store to hold all this information. In some cases, it's even automated for you as you're doing it. So there's a few types of metadata that you should keep track of. And I'll go over these really quickly. The first one is the model itself, because really until the end of the experiment, it's kind of hard to put a pin on which model to proceed with. So again, it's useful. It saves a lot of time. If all the experimental models are reproducible, as I mentioned, we want to keep track of that. Next, we have these feature pre-processing steps. Here's the idea. I mean, you have the raw data that you want to feed the model, but oftentimes, most of the times, this raw data is not always fed to the model for training, because you don't want to waste all these resources for something that you don't know if it's a good model to run yet. So in most cases, you kind of select the crucial information from the data sets, which the model needs. And these are called like the features. And these are picked from the raw data, and those become the model's input. And oftentimes we need to do some pre-processing steps to these features, like feature augmentation, how we're going to deal with missing values, let's say. Maybe we need to transform it into different formats that the model is requiring it to be in that format. There's many things that we can do. So we want to keep track of those. The hyperparameters, really high level, it's kind of the weights and biases of the model that we're applying, and we want to keep track of those. The data, of course, that data that's used for the model training and the evaluation. And here, sometimes we bring in stuff from the data dictionary or even the data catalog. So it's things like the column names, the types of data, maybe some stats on the data set, even where it's being located. We keep track of that. The metrics, that's just a fancy data sciencey way of saying results. So these are the results from the model evaluation. And of course, it's important in understanding how well you have built the model, how well it's performing. And lastly, the context. But here I'm talking more about the technical context. So it's information about the environment of a machine learning experiment, of an AI experiment that may or may not affect the experiment's output, but it could be a factor of change in it. So things like the source code, any packages, any libraries, their versions, the programming language and their versions, maybe even host information like environment variables, system packages, you name it. There's a lot that we could have in there that it's good to keep track of. So we hold that within the technical context metadata of the machine learning metadata store. So I hope you can see that if you're, a data professional, a business professional, even from the point of view of AI, I think when you're working with data in, again, whichever capacity, you can really benefit from these four tools, from the business glossary to track and understand your business verbiage, the data dictionary to help describe your data elements, your columns, what you're working with, the data catalog to help you find the data that you need, and then maybe even gauge its usefulness by seeing those reviews and descriptions and things like that. And in some cases, again, you need to actually request the rights to use it. So depending on your data governance implementation, that might be part of the process, that you do find the data sets, but then you need to put in that request. Okay, I need access to this so I can do that, and then it gets approved or denied, or what have you. And of course, the machine learning metadata store to ensure that rapid model optimization. You have to keep on doing this a few times. So this helps us with that transparency as well, reproducibility. It gives us a lot of cool stuff. As I was mentioning, the business glossary and the data dictionary, they reference each other. And we often see this metadata being surfaced or pushed into the data catalog and the machine learning metadata store as well. Okay, I promised I'm going to talk about this really quickly. So what's your answer? I'm really curious if you do have any answers now. But the idea in the end is that it depends, right? It really depends on your own, on your own definition and the context of your project that you're working in.
I noticed a couple of people said burrito, George, and I noticed a couple of people from US that said that, so I was interested in that. But I would normally say grilled cheese sandwich, but
Yeah.
that does go against what the agricultural area says. I'm not sure about a hot dog being a sandwich. I think my kids
Well,
would like that. They'd probably say, "Yeah, well, yeah, I'll have a sandwich. No worries."
well, it's funny that that you mentioned the burrito. I'll give you this anecdote about it. Um, in this the state of New York in the US, in a way, the burrito is considered a sandwich. So hear me out. So they have different types of taxes, and they have a type of tax for sandwiches. And they're taxing the burrito in the same way that they're taxing the sandwich. They're applying the sandwich tax to it. They're not applying it to the hot dog. They are applying it to. So from a tax perspective in the state of New York, the burrito is considered a sandwich. Isn't that like odd and interesting? So if you're, ever ordering a sandwich in New York and you're getting a burrito, now you know why.
Yeah, that makes sense then. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. But really, in the end, I mean, the takeaway from it all is that we need to understand our data. We need to understand our metadata, take care of it, care for it, and yeah, make sure it's accessible, clear, understood, and properly defined there.
So Jeff,
Awesome. Thanks,
you've
George.
jumped on
Yeah.
there, Jeff. Jeff, did you want to ask a question at all?
Yeah, George. So I'm interested in the difference between how far an inch, a thing like the sandwiches you were just showing, are from an exemplar. So it's the distance of every single object in the entire universe in terms of its semantic difference from the exemplar, as opposed to the ability to put them into mutually exclusive groups. To me, they're completely different problems. And so you need to understand what it is you're trying to do, what you're trying to achieve, and make sure that you don't apply the solution you have for the original problem into a brand new thing. So you don't do it for a secondary purpose, which is not for the same thing.
Definitely. And yeah, that's why a lot of implementations of these tools, but also how you are structuring your data and then even your data governance program, it's based on like a data domain or a business domain. And then you might have different definitions for, let's say, sandwiches, depending on that domain that it and the context, I guess, that comes with it that's being situated in.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, George. Well, we do have another question from David H that came through the chat. While we're here, guys, if anyone has any other questions, please continue to pop them in the chat or in the Q&A box. So from the question from David, how, as an architect in the data domain, can you ensure you are not eliciting data, information, or characterization requirements that contradict the business requirements management that sits in the business architecture domain?
Oh, well, I mean, that's a loaded question. And again, it really depends on how you're, in my opinion, structuring your data governance program overall and what those processes are. In my opinion, there should always be those checks and balances with anything that you do. You have, the clear understanding of what are the questions that need to be asked before this goes through, what are the people that I need to go through. Oftentimes we kind of have to go through data stewards if that's part of your data governance implementations that would kind of watch out for these and see, are there any conflicts? Are we all on the same page? Are we all in agreement with the scope of the project and how we're going to go forward with this? And the data steward, I mean, there are different types of data stewards, but they often have and walk the line between the technical side and the business side, so they have a good understanding of both and what those impacts would be. And I think they can facilitate those conversations very well between, let's say, the architect versus the business stakeholder.
Awesome. And so what do you perceive as the primary barriers or challenges in implementing metadata tools within your organization or projects?
Well, yeah. First of all, I think there's maybe a lack of understanding and awareness about their importance. So I remember one of my projects when I was trying to push this through and say, listen, I think we first need to focus on having a common understanding of all these high level terms mean to make sure we're not going to run into these issues when we're working on projects. And it was for the marketing department, and their CMO was saying, what do you mean? Like we have a business glossary, and she was showing me this Word document. The problem was that, yes, that was being shared across the organization, and then everybody was editing it for their own needs. And even though they had some sort of a document that had no version control and other stuff, but it was also always conflicting information. So yeah, so first I think it's that lack of understanding and awareness about their importance. There are resource constraints, as with anything. So this can come as a barrier, especially if you want to go for a vendor tool that would cost you some licensing money there. I think there are concerns about potential time and effort that's required for that initial setup, and more so again where those best practices are for putting this together, because the tool is not the answer ever, right? It's just helping you be a bit more efficient. But in the end, you need to be the ones that are putting together the processes, the guidelines for how do you create a definition, how do you even name the terms, and all of these, they take some trial and error if you don't have that experience on how you should best put them together, and of course that takes time.
I got an extension to that, George. I was just thinking, because I think the business glossary is one of the key ones, isn't it, to get the terms across your organization. But like I was working, it's just around COVID times in aged care, and there was a business glossary, and it it wasn't necessarily being edited, like you say, by different people. It was there, but it wasn't actually being translated into the way information was coming out, like on SharePoint and that sort of stuff. So you had the COVID and aged care which is really like it was a really tough time, and
Yeah.
getting that information out, particularly around reporting, and how that was done. There was a disconnect between what the glossary said and then what was out on SharePoint, and it was more like a knowledge management thing, because there was different SharePoint sites and there wasn't any governance and there was all that. So I don't know. Eventually they got that sorted out, but have you seen that as a problem? It's not just the glossary being right; it's all the messaging and
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, there's so many things that come with it.
yeah.
Oftentimes, and not just with this project, but I think with projects in general, we forget to involve the stakeholder and the main business stakeholders from the start. I feel like, oh, we think this is a good idea, and we are so excited. We go ahead and we implement it, and then we involve the business stakeholders later on. They're like, yeah, I never asked for this. I'm not on board. What are you saying? Or we involve them in the beginning, and then we're like, okay, let's go on and build you the best option, and then they don't hear from us for 6 more months, and then we come up with it, and they're like, oh, okay, I forgot about it. Yeah, that's not what I want. It's something else. So the lesson learned from that is we first of all need to involve those stakeholders from the beginning, get them on board, have them understand the why, right? They need to dial into the WIIFM, what's in it for me. And from the start, you need to tie whatever you're building, let's say business glossary in this case, but I think it applies to anything, to tie it back to the business goals. It obviously needs to serve a purpose, but then you need to connect it all the way to the unit level and even to the individual level, so that the individual understands, well, how does it benefit me? I need to understand what's in it for me. What do I get out of it? And once you're able to do that, and there's many different ways that you would be able to do so, Of course, a lot of consultation discussions to understand their pain points and then tie this end result to the pain points and how it's going to help address some of that. And again, I think business glossary, data dictionary, data catalog, and everything else, you can easily be tied to a lot of pain points that organizations are facing today. Once you get them on board and you keep them on board and engaged and part of the solution delivery, they'll be more likely to be able to adopt it and use it throughout. It's not just going to fall flat. Change management overall is really such a huge component when it comes to digital transformations. With any change, really, anything that we're bringing in as new, we need to involve those stakeholders. We need to have those ongoing communications, the training, the rewards as part of it. And we need to make it simple, right? As simple as possible. We ideally we don't want yet another tool that they now need to log into and search and yeah.
Yeah, that's outstanding. And just one last thing, like I did actually do a presentation with you, wasn't it, on the Good Data Morning Show? I think that was cool.
Yes.
And
Yes, you
and
did.
that's been renamed, hasn't it, George?
It's been renamed to just the Lights on Data show.
Yeah. So if you see that come up, and I know you post a bit in LinkedIn, George, that's really good. Plus your data governance courses are really good, and I've had feedback from those as well. So
Oh, thanks, Nigel.
yeah, it'd be really good.
Thank you.
George, I just have a couple more questions for you. So,
Sure.
what metadata tools should organizations focus on first?
I mean, I think it depends what the driver is, so why you're doing this. Ideally, do it all at once, but I understand that's also challenging. I would always start with the business glossary no matter what, because I feel at the highest level that's going to bring the best value, and we're all on the same page at least. But again, it depends what the driver is. If let's say it's some sort of ERP transformation project. So you're moving into a new enterprise resource planning system. There's obviously you're going to have to do a lot of that data conversion and push it into the new system. So a data dictionary for the IT team would be probably the higher priority to focus on. If there's some sort of a regulatory compliance that you need to abide to, I think the data catalog would be able to help right away, at least just to index all these data sets that you might have as part of the organization and at least know what you have at a high level. So it can help with that. So again, you need to tie back to the driver and then see based on what the motivation is, which tool should we invest into first.
Yeah, of course. And so, how do you communicate the value of metadata to the business?
I mean, as I was mentioning, you need to tie it to the what's in it for me. You need to translate into the business impact. Use relatable business cases to demonstrate how metadata really improves data quality, reduces risks, accelerates that decision making. It can prevent costly errors or speed up regulatory reporting overall. I'll give you this one example. I think Accenture ran this survey a while ago with like 1,000 different companies from, I think it was like finance, insurance, government, and there was another one, tech or anyways. But what came out from it is 25 middle managers were reporting that more than 25% of their time was being spent on looking for information in order for them to be able to do their job. And that is even looking for reports, but then also understanding what those reports mean. So when they were looking at their customer report, okay, what is the customer in that point of view? What is the cost revenue rate in that point of view? And they would often, call somebody, try and look through their emails, their common drives, OneDrive, what have you, OneNote, and all these SharePoint, all these other tools to understand, okay, what is it? Or they would call for a meeting and say, okay, we need this report from IT. These are our requirements. Here are how we need to have this table, these visualizations, and then maybe like a year later, somebody would have a similar request, and they would forget all about it because none of those understandings, definitions would be documented. Maybe at the very best, it would be put in an email that somebody would be unable to find. So a lot of time really is being spent right now on searching for all this information. Ideally, you do find it in a trusted, curated place that you can trust. There was another survey that I remember from the International Data Consortium, and this was maybe like a decade ago or so, but they were approximating based on that survey answers that they were getting that the average information worker, as they would put it, so that would be anybody that works with data, but also just consumes data, so looking at reports and things like that. Apparently, they would spend about 9.5 hours every week, just again, looking for information. That can equate up to, I don't know, $20,000 US per year spent on people just searching stuff, and in some cases, not even finding what they're looking for. So that's one, the business impact and the efficiency and cost savings, right, that come with this, having these tools in place. Not to even mention that machine learning metadata store. If you don't have something like that, having to redo it every time or manually record all that metadata so it's again reproducible, that's a time saver right there, that at least 50% of the time is being saved for the data scientists. And we paid our data scientists quite a bit usually, right? So we don't want for them to spend all that time really documenting these things or not documenting, and then it's hard to then showcase, well, why did the AI make that rationale and give me those answers?
Yeah, awesome. And Andrew has just sent through one last question. So he's asked, should we focus on improving our structured data or content and metadata first? Is there a natural priority between these two?
Yeah, I would say yes. But right now it's also quite a push on the unstructured data too, mainly because of the rise of the LLMs and the chatbots and things like that. So that's also taking priority, let's say. But I would say yes to your answer.
Yeah, and that's a good segue there, George, because Jeff and Amardeep will be speaking a bit more about that later today. So I think, yeah, you've done an excellent job today.
Absolutely. George, thank you so much for your time. I'm sure everyone who's been in on this session of yours is blown away by your presentation. So thank you for your time and for sharing your wisdom.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks,
everyone. Thanks for the great questions.
We've got some comments coming through saying, thank you very much. Well done, George. Yeah, everyone loved